Freedom Counsel is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Counsel is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcounsel.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
With another lovely episode of Broken Truth on a beautiful Southern California day. I'm John Davidson, and with me is co-host Warner Mendenhall, head of the Freedom Counsel and Mendenhall Law in Ohio. And today we are with Cindy, a whistleblower who is blowing the whistle on 8A fraud, which is something that just was addressed by Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon.
Yeah, it's good afternoon here in Ohio. Cindy and I are both in Ohio. And we have a very cold day here, 21 degrees out. But
that's brisk.
It's a beautiful day, though. It's snowy and a little bit of sun's peeking through out there.
So I got this text from Warner this morning. It's like, oh my gosh, did you see what Hegseth did? And I was like, I don't know. What are you talking about? And apparently, I'm on a news fast this month, so I have to rely on my friends to give me this information. But apparently, there's this whole 8A fraud, which is well, you know what? Let's just listen to some of what Secretary Hegseth said in his video, and then we'll go from there.
All right.
Now let's see if I can handle this using the power of technology. Let's see. Let me disable these captions. We don't need that anymore. All right. So here's Hegseth discussing fraud in the military.
When President Trump appointed me as your Secretary of War, I made you a series of promises. I promised that every single one of your taxpayer dollars would go toward one thing and one thing only: building the most lethal fighting force on the planet. And I promised we would gut the corruptive, unconstitutional, non-merit-based DEI programs that have weakened our military and distracted us from our primary mission. And I promised we would hunt down the waste, the fraud, and the abuse that has run rampant in this department for decades, and to instead redirect that money to President Trump's America First priorities. Well, today, we are once again taking action on these promises. We're actually taking a sledgehammer to the oldest DEI program in the federal government, a program few people outside of Washington have ever heard of, that I hadn't heard of. It's called the 8A program. Now, if you're like me, you're asking yourself, what is an 8A? It's a great question. 8A refers to the Small Business Administration's program to assist, quote, small, disadvantaged businesses owned by a socially disadvantaged individual or tribe, end quote. Providing these small businesses with opportunities is a laudable goal. But over the decades, as it happens, the 8A program has morphed into swamp code words for DEI, race-based contracting. And here's the worst part. In many, many instances, these socially disadvantaged businesses, they don't even do work. They take a 10%, 20%, sometimes 50% fee off the top and then pass the contract off to a giant consulting firm, commonly known as Beltway bandits. For decades, this program, 8A, has been a breeding ground for fraud, and this administration is finally doing something about it. The Department of Justice under Attorney General Pam Bondi recently exposed $500 million in 8A fraud. Treasury, led by Secretary Bessent, found another $250 million, and their investigation is just beginning. Treasury, Justice, and the Small Business Administration under Administrator Loeffler are all actively investigating their 8A contracts right now. Now, in the Pentagon, $100 million sole source contracts go out the door to these 8A firms almost every day. $100 million sole source contracts go out our door to these 8A firms almost every day.
Okay.
Without any competition.
Yeah, let's get started. I think he said some critical things here, and we don't need to listen to the rest of that. And I'll tell you what, I mean, my frustration level is through the roof, and Cindy will echo this, because we have been after the 8A program now for quite a while. I was really alerted to the SBA set aside funds, the contracting set aside funds, all of that back in the teens under the Obama administration. And in fact, I talked to the OIG for the contractors, and they said, look, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. And what's true about that, I learned, is that everywhere you look, there's fraud that's happening in this program. And I mean everywhere. And yet nobody's doing anything about it. And we've brought a number of different lawsuits. And in fact, I don't know if I've talked about the one that we had that I was very disappointed. This was a case that has gone up through the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. It's against the Chugach Corporation. And they were ripping off NASA, billing hours, nobody was working. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They're no longer qualified, as far as I can see, for the 8A program. But what happened one day, and I just gotta credit Cindy here. I'm sitting here thinking about these programs, and Cindy walks into my office, and she sits down and she starts giving me a list. She'd rank ordered 100 companies that she thought were committing the fraud, and I'm like, where have you been all my life, Cindy? I have been looking for a researcher to do this, anyway, and you bring it in on a platter. But the problem, I'm going to express some of this, and then Cindy, I want you to tell your story a little bit. But, the problem is Cindy brought in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fraud to the office, Cindy alone. He's talking about big departments. I'm saying Cindy here from Ohio brought in billions of dollars of fraud that needs to be recovered. And we have a case that's been sitting on a docket under seal for 3 years now with $200 million attached to it right now. And we've been begging and pleading for the government to stop spending the money. Here's the irony of the situation. That company is still getting the money. We identify them. It's hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they're still getting the money. It's ongoing. We have another one that we tried to stop out in Kansas, for example, and the DOJ would not pursue it. And I'll tell you, it's really a weird thing. And if I get these facts wrong, Cindy, correct me on anything, please. But it was supposed to be a woman-owned business, and it was a black woman who set up the business, supposedly, but her husband was running the business. He's not a woman. Yet, because he was African-American, they refused to intervene and correct the fraud. And, that was actually just $8 million, but they wouldn't step in and corrected. And the point of this is, and the program itself, if it were run properly, goodness gracious, we all know that people need a hand up somewhere here and there. And let's get women involved in defense contracting and minorities involved in these contracts because they're very lucrative. They're great. But let's have honest people do it, not people who are just a shell for some big company. That's the problem. And
Can I interject about the one company?
I just want to talk real quickly, Cindy, and you go. Cindy is so brave to be stepping up because she is currently within that contracting process. She has some contracts. She's stepping up to tell the world what she knows. And there's been very few people brave enough to do it because, of course, it could have the possibility of messing up your ability to contract in the future because they retaliate against you. And the efforts that she's gone through to alert the government to the scope of the fraud have been unbelievable. And Cindy, go.
Thank you. Just to jump ahead just for a second to the one example you gave. I had notified the SBA's business opportunity specialist, and he told me that he had reported that company over a year before. He knew they were frauds, but this all started happening during the immediate shutdowns during COVID. And then trying to reach out to him. When he had asked me, I said, can I use your name? He said, if you have to, but if you don't have to, please don't. He was supposed to be meeting with the OIG's office the week after the COVID shutdown started, or the week the shutdowns did start, and then didn't hear back. When I finally talked to his boss a few months later, I found out this poor gentleman died. I even spoke to the man's wife, and she said he was emphatic about trying to fight the fraud himself, and even within SBA couldn't. The other political thing for that is the guy had been appointed an acting commissioner for Social Security Administration. When he didn't get certified, instead he got, I think it was about a $4.5 million contract from the Department of Defense. When I reported to SBA about this company, they said, well, it doesn't matter if it's not a woman-owned business because this is an 8A. The thing is both these programs require the person owning the company and getting certified to actively be managing the day-to-day operations of a business. So either they were committing fraud in one, the other, or both. I believe it was both. But then the DOJ and SBA basically did not follow through for us, and we lost on that. If I may back up a little now, I've been in IT since I was in high school, went to college for it. Started working for the federal government as a contractor in 2002 at the beginning of DHS. Was on several contracts as an independent consultant. And in 2009, everybody said, come back when you have more people. Try to grow your business. It'll be great. You're a woman-owned business. But what I kept finding was more and more demoralizing and disturbing to me. I'm really good with data as long as I have access. I'm not a hacker. I wish sometimes I could find the stuff that's behind the scenes. But what you can find publicly available is extremely disturbing. I have been notifying people at SBA since approximately, 2014 or 15, and working with SBA reps. 8A and woman-owned have very similar issues, except the example I give for 8A, everybody who's heard the example, the story I give, the analogy, has said that's brilliant. And I don't mean to like pat myself on the back. I'm just saying it fits so much. It's like your kid's youth basketball team with LeBron and Kobe and Shaq and Bird and Kareem are competing against your kids. And by the way, the refs, who are the contract officers, SBA, in Congress, are told they're not allowed to call a penalty on the other team. They could take your kid and slam against the backboard, and they get away with it. Over 50% of every federal dollar spent on IT that is supposedly going to an 8A is going to one of these Alaska Native corporations. Something Warner said there doesn't even go a little far enough, is initially ANC's, Alaska Native Corporations, were created, I think it's Congressman Ted Stevens or Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska. Right. And it was supposed to have a time frame where it was supposed to end. Instead of ending it when the time came, SBA said, oh, let's join them together with the small disadvantaged businesses. Like, wait a minute, you're taking the small disadvantaged businesses and combining with companies who don't have to follow any of the rules. There's no size standards on them. We have a time limit. We're only allowed to be in the program for approximately 8 years, I believe. And those companies just keep spinning off. I'm on a contract vehicle specifically for 8A companies where I'm competing with joint ventures and ANCs, who are companies who've graduated years and years ago or are spinoffs. I'm competing with for an IT contract, I'm competing with a door company, a fitness company, and a bunch of the others. And Warner's example of Chugosh is one of them. The other thing I found with this is that they also don't have the size limitations on compensation. As an 8A business, there's limitations. It used to be 250,000. I think it went up to 350,000 on how much the head of the company can make. I'm looking at a chart here that I downloaded and found various places where the EVP and COOs and CEOs make as much as $5.129 million. And now it's actually up to $9 million for the heads of the company. I see an example in defense has
let's put a little exclamation on that, Cindy, because what it is, you're a small business, you're vying for these contracts, and then the CEO is supposed to get paid well to operate full time, but it's not an unlimited amount. It should not be in the millions, because if you're making in the millions, you're no longer a disadvantaged small business. You're in a different category. You need to move on and compete in the market in a regular way. You've had your leg up. Go compete. So I'm going to put some exclamation points when you bring up something like that. Okay. Keep going, please.
Okay. Well, I was just looking here, and back in 2021, this one company, the top two people made $9 million and $8.8 million. And that's more than a sole source award for an 8A, which is another issue. And in fact, that's being put on hold. A sole source award it's never supposed to be allowed to be more than $4.5 million. So these two individuals who are not Alaska Natives, they are hired guns by these Alaska Native corporations, are getting compensation more than twice as much as an entire small disadvantaged business can get on sole source. Now, the program was, like I said, was supposed to end, and I don't remember off the top of my head when it was supposed to end, but they lumped them together. The other thing there's a lot of stuff that happens here, and I'm kind of not sure if I'm going to jump too much. 8A, I know I've met on the phone a woman who's fought the 8A program too, because of how they allow people into the program. But they also allow JVs, like I said, joint ventures. And a lot of times the contract officers are using these vehicles as a weapon against small businesses. It's called category management. I do not know an innocent small business who can support category management, because it's like shortening. The procurement law is supposed to require free and fair and open competition. These programs eliminate that option. They make it where some companies have literally been given a week before they graduate from their 8A. They've been given a sole source contract for up to 10 years that allows them to be the only company to compete for work for the federal government. So like my company, I'm not going to go into the details of it right now. People who can find it. We are the best at a particular technology. We actually teach it for the software vendor. I don't even get an opportunity to bid on that work because I'm not the 8A who controls that work. And the contract officers don't necessarily even check for you. They use category management, and they can hardwire contracts to their favorite companies. In one case, I bid on something with one agency repeatedly, various things for them. And I'm like, I know my company is really good at this, and I know we're efficient. So I underbid the incumbent by 32%. Supposedly, the contract officer came back and claimed that the incumbent underbid themselves by 33%. Now, in the another opportunity came up, and I'm like, I am not going to be burned again. So I went to the contract officer, and when the next one came up, I said, because then, the incumbent knew it was less work. So I went back to them on the next bid and asked the contract officer, who I had been talking to about these opportunities for 6 to 8 years. So investing incredible amounts of my time and effort towards this because it's the area we're experts. I said, is this the same exact amount of work? You asked for a number of people on this proposal. I don't want to get into a situation where you can say somebody else knew they could do it quicker. They wrote back and told me it's the same level of effort and the same amount of work. So this time I underbid the incumbent, which was a mega corporation, not a small one. It's one of the top vendors for the federal government. I underbid them by 33%. What do you know? Supposedly they underbid themselves by 34%. I'm like, are you kidding me? They put requirements in the contract officer that one of the areas is older technology, and they required every COBOL programmer that a small business would submit have a master's degree. I said, in what? They didn't care. I'm like, wait a minute. You want a master's degree in this? Could it be in New Guinea underwater basket weaving? And he's like, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm like, but these are COBOL programmers. I got people with 40, 50 years experience. They may not have an undergrad degree, but they're experts in their fields. And I was told by multiple people at that defense agency that they didn't care. And I said, well, what about an example of Oracle? The owner of Oracle, my mind just went blank on him, but Steve Jobs from Apple or Microsoft and Bill Gates.
Larry Ellison.
Yep, Larry Ellison. I said none of them had college degrees, let alone master's degrees. Right. And the guy came back to me and said, well, I'm not hiring them for programmers. I'm like, wait a minute. You want the programmer to have a degree that nobody has. But the way contract officers can use this to harm small businesses is once they get your proposal, if you don't meet some made up false requirement, they throw it in the basket. Now, at the same time they were doing this was in Donald Trump's first administration, in June, I think, of that year, he wrote an executive order saying that you cannot require education requirements above and beyond what's needed for the work to be done at the state level. I also researched a site that the government puts out called USA Jobs, and they hire in-house people for these same jobs. They had 0 education requirements, not a master's, not a bachelor's, not an associate. No education requirement if you're a government person, but phony requirements if you're a contractor. It's a way to use.
And let's point out, COBOL is an old language. I mean, what we've got are some very, very ancient systems in the U.S. government, and it's hard to find people who actually can operate those old systems. So this is a ridiculous requirement in today's environment.
Right. So I've also looked at the woman-owned business, and in that particular agency, I had targeted because they use what we use. I know another sub-agency who recommended me to the agency years before, and still was. And I thought so I've been trying to work with them for a long time. So I did analysis of the companies they claim are woman-owned who've gotten work for that agency. I believe it was 19 companies. When I did a deep dive into those, and it doesn't have to be as deep as I went, but I went pretty darn deep. I love this. 15 were absolutely, without a doubt, positively owned and run by a man. 3 more were suspect, and only 1 had gotten very small awards, and they were pretty clearly run by a woman, but they were like a tiny fraction. So I've done this wider and broader. A few years back, maybe 5 or 6 at this point, I can't remember. The SBA sent out a notice saying they were going to change the rules that only woman-owned small businesses who were certified could get woman-owned small business awards. And that's only a 5% goal for the agencies. I went in and I looked. Over 90% of every federal dollar spent claiming it's going to a woman-owned small business is going to a company owned and or run by a man, in most cases a husband. Not always, but most cases. And they know it. I've even talked to a small business liaison for a federal agency that Warner and I have talked about a number of times. And she said, we know, but there's nothing we can do as long as SBA lets them be certified. They know this is the case, and they keep doing it anyway. In that case, and I won't go into identifying because I don't want to give Warner a heart attack, The husband had worked with the agency for a dozen years with various other people, other companies. His wife is a physician who's been billing Medicare into the millions of dollars. She does not work in IT, has never worked in IT, did not set up the company, has the only involvement is, in like a lot of cases, the men will stick their wife's name on, as I use the term, a beard. They stick their wife's name on as the CEO. The problem is the law is very clear, the Small Business Act and the False Claims Act, and I was actually advised this by people from a legal department at SBA to look into this stuff, because the law is very clear that that you have to be running the day-to-day operations. So I've researched the law extensively, and I've researched the companies, and there are so many that every time I start working on this, I might start earlier with a particular agency, and I start tracking it down, because the men normally have no qualms about admitting that they're founders or co-founders, or on their profiles, you'll see everything's about them. And the only thing you'll see about a wife is a name on some corporate document that they had her sign. No presence, no existing, no, they just aren't doing the work. They aren't doing it. And the same thing, everything with the woman owned is the same thing with the 8A.
They're really not covering their tracks. I mean, you'll see the men, the main owners out there touting their businesses as their businesses, going to conferences, flitting around the country. And I mean, sometimes the wife maybe is taking care of the kids and not operating any business. And in the one instance, we found that the wife was a full-time physician, and we tracked that through the Medicare records, because we could see the millions in billings that she was doing through Medicare, which has nothing to do with the IT business. So that it was just you can cross-reference some of these databases and get very clear picture of what's happening, and you present that to the government, and nothing happens. So when I saw HEGSETH's statement today, I was extremely excited. I am a skeptic after all these years of non-responsiveness, but I'm also maintain some hope. And that's the reason. And the people like Cindy give me hope, because she's risking it all to come forward and to talk about her own experiences and blow the whistle on this. And Cindy, I want to talk about one other thing that we have seen that is just shocking, is how it works from when government insiders who are working in these programs then come out and ensure that businesses get 8A contracts.
Okay. May I? Then,
yes,
okay. An example is I was a independent consultant with a very large federal contractor. And at one point, a couple of years into the contract, they moved somebody into an office right next to me, and he never seemed to do anything on the contract. And all the other people there would be talking about, why is he here? Well, it turns out he was a former executive from inside an agency. And what I learned was that they will frequently, if a large contractor especially, but it could be a smaller business too, wants to get work with an agency, what they do is they hire one of those people who have left the agency, and then they're almost guaranteed to get the work. So it was like, I didn't really register at first because, I kept going to vendor outreach sessions in DC, and everybody there would keep asking me, who do you know? I'm like, what are you talking about? You guys are, everybody knows who these companies are. So SAIC, GDIT, CSC, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. You're them. You know everybody everywhere. Why are you asking us? Because they want us to basically use our 8A to get some work there. And they figure they're not going to get the work unless we have somebody in our back pocket. I've talked to a vendor that I've worked with before who said she legitimately runs her own company, but she worked until she hired one of the executives from that agency. And now her company is in good bed with the agency because they're handing it over. Another example of this, though, was really disgusting. I told Warner a little bit about it. I was having trouble with GSA and a GSA contract that has a minimum amount there in order to pay you $2,500. And they just kept blocking me on stuff. Like, we had worked with some major healthcare organizations and major Medicaid systems, and we are a top vendor in that area. But the GSA person would not let me have the things I needed in order to be effective on that contract. So I tried to report it to, during the last administration, a gentleman named Sonny Hashmi was appointed, and he would speak to me, but he wouldn't follow through. So when he got confirmed, he just disappeared, could not reach him. It's another thing. None of these agencies make their people available. No direct emails, no direct phone numbers, no response when you call the generic numbers. I even paid a company thousands of dollars to get access, and every phone number I called at one agency was either unmanned, disconnected, or never valid, and no responses ever there. So I finally connected to somebody through LinkedIn who was a former commissioner. And he told me, so they're stonewalling you. And I said, I know. He said, and the more he heard the story, he said, no, they're not stonewalling you. They're trying to kill you. This is ridiculous. So he gave me the name of a friend of his who was also a former commissioner. And he said, he'll put you in touch with Sonny Hashmi and other executives at GSA. But when I talked to that man, he told me first thing I needed to do was give him control of all of my contracts, not just the one I'm trying to get straightened out with GSA, but all of my contracts, my entire business, and give him $24,900 a year for him to make a phone call or to help me. This is like a LinkedIn connection, sending to me to a LinkedIn connection. I'm like, are you insane? You want $50,000 in control of my business to make a phone call? And I'm like, this is insane. And when I tried to report it, what's on 50,000? I'm like, 2 years? Well, that's only 48,800. Like, oh my God.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm like, why are you trying to kill us? I mean, literally, just so you know, I mean, I want on the record here, we are extremely talented and extremely good. I've gone from no employees to being the top vendor for one of my customers, been a preferred vendor for others. We teach a technology, and they require you to do something called open ratings. Our open ratings are darn near perfect. Some people have, and past performance reviews, we've had customers who said, if I never had to work with another company, I'd be thrilled. I've had other former customers want to come work for me when they retire from their jobs, not federal level, not people making the decisions on the contracts, but others. So we're good at what we do. We don't deserve this kind of treatment. But one more thing on this is I have gone to, like I said, over a dozen vendor outreaches at just one organization, one agency, but to others too. And I've even sent emails out to other 8As. I have a copy of an email I sent out detailing the fraud and abuse in the 8A program, and I received dozens of responses. I only sent it out. There's thousands of 8A companies, and very few ever get any work on their 8A. And the SBA keeps pushing people to register as woman-owned or as 8A, but then they don't push to help you get any work. So it's almost like these, they call it OSDBU, Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, and small business liaisons. It's almost like their mission is just to get you to register so they can check mark that they did their job. But when you talk to the Office of Contract Management, they won't help you. And when I talk to the other 8As, they all say, who do we contact? Who do we reach? And we've tried to reach Congress. And I'm hoping that somebody from Congress will watch and address this, because I have personally reached out to the Small Business Committee and several other committees from oversight committees in House and Senate. And I don't know if I'm not getting the right people or the right response, because when I reach certain Congress people, they tell me to reach out to the committee. And when I reach out to the committee, they tell me to talk to your Congress people. And if my people aren't on the right committee, we can't go anywhere. But there's thousands of other companies who are impacted and hurt and have been pleading for help. I even know some that are actual Native Americans who don't get a chance to compete because the super 8As, which is what they call these tribal ANC and Hawaiian-based companies who aren't in Alaska or Hawaii, they're told that they're not allowed to compete because the work goes to them. And the one gentleman told me of another vendor, commercial vendor, who teamed up with one of the ANC Super 8As in order to get the work, so he couldn't. An actual Native American couldn't get Native American work because it's going to these other companies.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Ron Johnson is all over this. His committee, I don't know if I have the right name for it, but he's the subcommittee on government operations is all over this, Cindy. And what I'd like to see if you could do this. I mean, if we have some people who are trying to get these 8A contracts that are actually qualified, and they're being blocked by unqualified people, that's a heck of a story to tell, and we should tell it. I mean, small business is the largest employer in this country. It develops more work. It develops more employment for more people than any other sector. And we do need to support it, and we do need to support and help people become successful small business people. And like you said, Cindy, get them in, get their bootstraps pulled up, and move them on. And let's get this capitalist system working properly. But this kind of government capture, agency capture, this kind of corruption where the government employees come out and have a nice little nest to sit in and scrape off the taxpayer, that's got to end. And so your statements here today are actually very important. And maybe we can get a group of people that can approach Senator Johnson.
I would hope so. I've tried, but it's tough to get to the right people. I know that they're inundated with people, but I had tried to talk before when it was like 2, 3, 4 administrations ago that I've been trying to
back up. It's a new day. That's what I'm telling you. It is a new day. I think that Pete Hegseth means what he says. I think Ron Johnson means what he says. We have, my estimate is about $1 trillion in fraud in the yearly budget. We could be operating this country without budget deficits, and we could be operating this country without 30-some trillion dollars in debt if we had just taken care of some of these problems early enough. And we need to start. It's never too late to fix the problem. Let's start today and start getting a grip on it. And I think our economy will actually boom. John, what do you think?
It seems like the first order of business is to identify the contract officers that are clearly corrupt. I love it when you say their names, because those are the roaches that don't like lights. And who hires these contract officers? Where do they get their jobs? I want to know the entire system, the network under it, because that's what's propping it up. My second question is, should this even exist? Should it only be mostly focused on the size of a company and not the demographic makeup of its leadership? That's a merit-based system. If you're the best, I don't care if you're a woman or a guy or pink or blue. I don't care. You're the best. That should be what it works at. And if you're a small company under X size, not X the company, but under a certain size, those should be able to apply. I tried to apply to be part of this system for government contracts as a company, as a white male CEO. And every other form had a check mark. Are you minority? Are you female? So by the end of it, I was like, why am I even doing this? It's clear what they're looking for. And this was 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So I don't know if the system should live like this, because if it's allowable to pick and choose based on these merit-based decisions, right. I don't know if we should do it. What do you think?
I kind of agree with you. I was like a little hesitant to raise it with the newer administration. And I did get to talk to Senator Moreno's wife when he was a candidate, and to another congressman. And I don't know why they don't take it further. I mean, they're new to the area and they're not in those committees, but it still has to start happening. But when I was afraid to go to them, because I'm like, I am fairly conservative, I'm actually very conservative. But my point was, I don't care if you get rid of the woman-owned small business program, if you get rid of the 8A, that's fine. But don't claim you're effectively supporting women in small business when you're literally not. I mean, you are absolutely not. And I hate to say this, but I'm looking at houses where these certain families keep spinning off one member of the family. These people, some of these people are supposedly small disadvantaged business. Some of the rules for the 8A program, for people who aren't aware, is you have to have a certain size business and you can't have more than a certain level of personal net worth. So my business, I self-invest in my business. I don't pull any money out. When I started in this, I had nothing. I lost $50,000 one of the first years I had my business because I was putting my blood, sweat, and tears, and I had to pay employees when I wasn't making anything because I wasn't working on a contract myself. I was making a small percentage off of them. But I'm looking at people who have houses that are these mega mansions in the DC area where, and it's, I hate to say this, there's a lot of people who come from H-1B backgrounds, and a lot of them are using a lot of H-1Bs to do a lot of their work, and they are living in
Explain what H-1B is. I think most of our audience may know, but H-1B is an immigration visa. Talk about that for a minute.
It's mainly used by Indians, and they hire these people. And I've actually had one Indian man subcontract through me whose vendor, they just take advantage of them. They treat them like slaves because there is a caste system still in a lot of people in India. And I've had Indian men with no experience telling a manager they refuse to work for me at a customer site. And there is a lot of, and so they are allowed in a visa if they have certain levels of education, like a master's degree, supposedly. But when you check, I hate to say this because I have had some very good people from every country. I'm not every country, I'm small enough, it's not that, but from a lot of different countries. But there has been a practice where a lot of people will put false information on their resumes. There's another company that I had reported to the SBA and DHS OIG. They claimed to be a woman-owned business. It was run by two brothers. They used a lot of H-1Bs in the past, but you could tell some of the stuff that was going on. H-1B is the visa status, and people are treated, like I said, treated kind of like slaves on it. But a lot of these companies apply, and you go to the Department of Labor, I believe it is, and you can get a list for which companies are applying for H-1B visas. They displace American workers. I've had people who worked for me because a lot of the stuff is older and might include mainframe and older technologies where Americans have been forced to train their foreign replacements. And many of those people are on H-1B visa. Now, in response to President Trump talking about limiting that, some companies are planning to increase the amount of work they send overseas instead of bringing the people over here. So people who have complaints because they get a phone call by somebody with a heavy accent and they can't communicate. I mean, was it President Biden who said you couldn't go into a 7-Eleven without having an accent? I'm like, he's mocking this thing. And there are some people who are good, but it's overloaded. And so a lot of H-1B people run 8As and they will stick their wife's name on it. And then they land up living in like a company called Tata and Infosys. They have billions and billions and billions of dollars. CGI is the company that did the website for Obamacare. To do a website, it's appalling. We try to compete for some. This is another case where you're talking about government efficiency. I was brought in as a subject matter expert to a Department of Homeland Security contract. And there's a technology, a database technology where I am a subject matter expert. And they brought me in really late. It was the first company, a very huge contract company, had this work for 7 years. Another company had it for a year. They had me working with somebody from this vendor that didn't know. The first meeting I was in, he goes, I don't know this technology, but here's what we should do. I literally shuddered. I'm like, I'm an expert in this technology, and that's absolutely the worst thing you can do. I got in there a little while, and I said, wait a minute, you're doing what? They're converting database information. So think of it like as a spreadsheet or a section of columns of data and information, and they're going to convert it from one technology to another. It's funny when I talk to people in my realm, I go, how long do you think that'll do? And they all laugh. I go, do you want to know how long they were billing the government to do this work and they still weren't done when I got there? 8 years. 8 years. It shouldn't have taken 8 days. Okay. Maybe thoroughly testing and everything. I said, okay, if you want to say thoroughly testing, getting through all the other stuff, maybe 8 weeks. But literally in the first week there, I'm like, I had created programs to convert it. When they didn't renew my contract because the vendor lost the work, they gave it to another company that was Indian-based. The owner had been a former H-1B, and they gave the work to them, and they still didn't get the work done. But I had talked to the system owner, and first thing she asked me is, are they lying to me? I go, well, tell me what they're telling you. Well, it can't be done because this, and this. I used to refer to it to them and to her when she told me what they were telling her, plus what I knew. I said it was the national debt solution. And to give it some context, they were doing some weird, I don't want to use the term, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate to use here, but half-assed solution that was going to read through every transaction that happened in a day. And it was taking them 1.8 hours to process every 1 hour of data. So you're surprised you're not catching up?
Yeah, you're just falling behind at all times.
And instead of just giving me the contract to do the work, or even letting me bid on the contract to do the work, no, we have a contractor for that.
Hey, I want to go to another direction here as we're closing out, Cindy. We've had a remarkable crowdsourced effort on daycares. And one of the things that I've seen on the daycare, I mean, this is, a drop in the bucket, in terms of federal fraud, but it's got everybody's attention now. What I'd like you to do, if you can, sketch out, if somebody wanted to research this kind of fraud in the 8A program, what are some of the data sources, maybe the SAM database, and explain what the databases are that are available and how you can cross-check the data to determine kind of what your process is. Let's get some crowdsourced investigators moving out there.
Absolutely. Okay, there's a site called sam.gov. For some reason, they make you register, but you have to have.
And that's sam.gov.
sam.gov. Yes. There's also a site, and then in there you can research a company, find the name, find the identifier. It's called a UEI, Unique Enterprise Identification, I think. I can't remember the exact syntax for it, but it's a unique identifier. It's like a 16-character letter and number ID. Yeah. They also have where I often start when I'm trying to research some of the stuff is I go to usaspending.gov. Right. I'm always afraid to name my sources because occasionally things appear to go offline.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
We've seen that happen. Right.
Yeah. So I will go there and you can download information. Unfortunately, they throw a lot there, but you can go for particular years, and there are things called NAICS codes, which are North American Industrial Classification, NAICS. But they describe the type of work. So when I'm looking for IT, for example, I know to go for a code that starts 5415. It's a 6-digit code. After that, I filter it down, and you can see on there, you can filter and look for set-asides. You can look for type of work. You can look for year. You can look for location. You can look for agency. And a lot of times, if I really want to do a broad brush, I will download all of that information and put it into a spreadsheet, and then you can create filters on the data tab of a spreadsheet, and you can filter down on that. So frequently I do that, and you can look for what type of set aside and whether the company claims to be woman-owned or male or minority-owned, and what minority. There's a column near the end that shows whether they're 8A participant. It's far near the end, which also shows the highest paid individuals for those organizations, where sometimes it's as much as $17 million a year for somebody supposedly a small business. I go to that site and I get the UEI that's there, and I can check SAM for that. You can check for the name of the company. There's a parent company and a company name there, vendor, parent and vendor name, recipient. They're called recipients. Then you could also go to a site called DSBS. It's the Dynamic Small Business search that's controlled by the SBA. If you're certified and registered in SAM, you're also certified and registered in the SBA site. That had disappeared for a while and came back. But you can search in DSBS, but it's not called dsbs.gov. It's called something. You search for that, and then it comes up with a link to search for it. Another thing I do is you can go to state government and look for who owns a company. So it's called, like, let's say you're going to Virginia. Virginia has a business entity search. You go to the business entity search and you can find corporate documents there. Another site, which I don't want to give too many away because people will maybe start covering their tracks, but there's a variety of professional websites where people will list their position and their ownership. And there's a variety of sites. If you can just internet search for a lot of this stuff and find it. And then additionally, then I go a step further. I started paying a site where I can search for people by phone number, name, address. And what I found there, one of my good ones, I know Warner liked this one too when I told him about it. We're not sure how we go about it, because if the committee is looking at this, I need you to know it's not just the federal contractor that's the problem. It's also other federal employees. And things like Warner's talked about, violations of the False Claim and the Small Business Act, do not address the fraud that takes place by government employees in this process. So I found an example. I was looking at agency, and everybody knows about this one agency being filled with fraud. I don't want to go there yet because of the example I'm going to give. I found that a woman that actually owns a company that does IT work for them. And at first I'm like, wow, finally I found one. But then I went to this other site, and I not only looked for her, I looked for who lives with her. So I found a person with a different last name. And when I searched on him, he was one of the head contract officers for the agency with all kind of ties to SBA. And she actually testified in front of Congress about how hard it is to be a woman-owned business. Well, honey, if we're not married to the contract officer, I think we have a little bit more of an issue than you do. And I called another joint connection I had who knows her. And when I started to tell her the story, she goes, let me guess, you found her husband, didn't you? I'm like, wow. So you can use independent sources, you can use connections, but the places, the government sites that I will start will be usaspending.gov, sam.gov, Dynamic Small Business Search, and the SBA, and state business entity searches normally run by secretaries of state. Because the companies that we're talking about, that I've talked to about with Warner, many of them were initially created by the husbands, and they may stick the wife's name on, but almost never are they actually really involved.
Amazing. Well, you have really done amazing work on all this, and I can't thank you enough for that. And I think, I do think that we have the ability. We have so many talented people on Twitter, for example, who just are digging in all over the country on fraud issues, that maybe we can get a groundswell of researchers going. But what fundamentally we need is we need a responsive government. That's where, my frustration, I've been in this, doing this kind of work for almost 30 years. And the government in the entire time is oddly non-responsive.
Can I give you one to put up there, John and Warner? I found really good information on a case, and it's on X as Stop WOSB Fraud. And it talks about GSA corruption and FOIA corruption. FOIA is supposed to be the Freedom of Information Act, where people have the right to get publicly released information. And this posting shows where, in order to squash a FOIA request, the officer for GSA sent it to the people who were hiding the information, and they came back and claimed that work was going to honor the FOIA request. was going to take 36,000 man hours, 18 people full time for a year, and going to cost the person doing the request $1,775,000 plus dollars. The person who put that video out there shows you can honor that request in as little as 2 minutes, and has tried to notify various people in government, but they don't have a big enough bullhorn. So we appreciate anybody who would look at that and say, that's appalling.
Yeah, I'm looking at Stop WSB Fraud right now. It's a very is this a new one?
No, it's been there for a couple years.
I see, but
GSA, nobody participates with it. But there are two major posts. The first one is I believe it's a 50-page PowerPoint that was while it was going on, where they give examples and evidence, and it includes the evidence. I mean, it's just like actual literal evidence. And the second one was the video that shows the FOIA request, and that the response where GSA claimed it was going to cost 36,000 man hours. And in the first minute of the 2-minute video, it shows how the request could have been honored in minutes.
All right, I'm going to put that in a comment on Twitter here if I can. Control, Stop WSB Fraud.
I've got it on screen.
Okay. And I know we're almost done.
Yeah.
Time-wise, but one other thing Warner had talked about with me, and I had done some research on, is the COVID money. The first pass, I can do it pretty quick. The first pass to COVID only required you to have 250 or less employees. They had no means testing. So companies who were federal contractors who gained work, some of them tens and hundreds of millions of dollars work they gained because of and during COVID, got to keep their COVID money, the PPP money. And when trying to talk to you about money being fungible, I'm not sure if this is going to work. Window here. Nope, it's not going to let me share. The money that you take in, for example, before COVID, you have a bank account and your incoming revenue, say your incoming revenue is $5 million. If your outgoing expense was $1 million for payroll, $50,000 for rent, $10,000 for supplies, and $100,000 for benefits, your balance at the end of this was like $3.8 million. But after getting COVID, think of a column on the left where you still have that money came in on the left. Now you open an account from COVID and you put it on the right. So your incoming, say you got $1.16 million of COVID money. You put the PPP money in that column on the right. You're still getting the income you were getting before, at least $5 million. But out of that $5 million, you no longer have to pay the payroll, the rent, supplies, or benefits. That was all being charged against your COVID money. So you maybe had a balance of $10,000 left at the end of your COVID account. But instead of having $3 million left in your main account, you now have $4.99 million.
And you'd go buy a house or a car or whatever you wanted to do with that money. A house on the beach might be nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things, I do think that the DOJ has been slow to prosecute that type of fraud with the PPP, but there was a self-certification that due to the economic uncertainty at the time that you are certifying you would need that money. So their defense is going to be, look, we had economic uncertainty. We didn't know whether this contract would continue or not. Do you think that would be a valid defense, Cindy?
Only
were these contracts locked?
Only if they can get away with a technicality.
They were locked in, weren't they, though? They knew these contracts were flowing and weren't going to get shut off, right?
Right. No, and a lot of them gain new ones. And even when they have government shutdowns, the contractors frequently are not shut down. And another thing a lot of people don't realize, I talked to some people because we do some business with the government and with other government agencies. When they start working again, they get paid for the time off. So, and I actually tried to protest something that happened with another agency that it's kind of funny in a way. So if you compare it to construction, it's like they were claiming small businesses who bid on work for Social Security Administration had to have done the equivalent, if you were in construction, of having built 3 small towns from the ground up, including infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, utility plants, gas stations, childcare, grocery stores, doctor's offices. You will have had to do that 3 times before they let you bid as a small business. And it's like these places just kept making out like crazy. And I don't know, I'm just.
Well, we are at the end of the hour, I think, John.
Agreed.
Cindy was just illuminating. We happened to be sort of on the same path, and we ran into each other. But she has illuminated my practice of law because of the depth of her knowledge and her just really, really commitment to this. And has really helped me to understand in much greater detail than I did before what's really going on. And it just gets worse and worse. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
My last comment is, if anybody watches this who's in government who wants to address fraud, is I have personally addressed this to the General Counsel's office of the SBA. I've addressed it to other people that I said, please just give me the contract for this. I've tried to reach out to Congress to say, look, I was Doge before there was Doge. When the Doge came in, I'm like wanting to scream, come talk to me. I'm like begging you. I mean, heck, if you gave me 1% as payment for this, we could save billions or trillions, and I'd make out like a bandit, but I mean,
1% bounty would be incredible on that.
Right.
But under the False Claims Act, which we are suing on, there's a much bigger bounty. Our bounty can range anywhere between 15 and 30%. So we are hunting fraud. Cindy is hunting fraud in particular, and we want others to join us because it's going to take a massive effort. I'm going to point out that this is not a left or right issue as well. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. You don't want to be ripped off if you're paying taxes to the government. And nobody wants to see this level of fraud happening. And we certainly want to have opportunity for small businesses to grow. But this program is a complete disaster and a mess at this point.
I think it should just be gutted, frankly.
Yeah, just start over.
Burn it down.
Yeah.
I did talk to the woman who sued, and they had to change some of the program. And what was really gross is on some 8A conferences afterwards, they had people suggesting, even people who've been involved in key TAM cases, False Claims Act cases, suggesting to people how to use AI to alter your narrative to make sure that you get to stay in the program.
Oh,
and the woman has basically tried to go underground because she fears for her safety.
Yeah.
Unreal.
All right.
Cindy, thank you so much for your work. Please keep going. And I hope that you win that 30% bounty, and don't forget about me.
I'll tell you what, John, I won't forget about you. Cindy, if she gets her bounty, needs to go and enjoy the bounty if we ever get there. God help us.
It would be great, but honestly, I want to make a difference. I want to stop.
Yeah, I know.
It harms so many people.
You did not get in this for the money. You're just so frustrated with what you've experienced. And I find that, John, frankly, with all the whistleblowers we represent, most of them did not get in it for greedy reasons at all. They saw a problem. Cindy's in the environment. She knows what the problem is. And it's just disgusting that we can't get the government to respond. So I'm very hopeful about what Pete HEGSETH said. Obviously, Ron Johnson's just a powerhouse there and is going after this. I think Moreno here in Ohio as well is interested, and I think we're going to see some change. And Cindy, you're part of that change, and your years of work in this are paying off.
I hope so. I pray so. And if anybody wants to talk to me, go through Warner.
I'm gonna help you make some connections here. I will. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you both. And we will see you guys next week. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe that one case, the right case, can change the world. If you believe this too, Freedom Counsel is for you. Pursuing a major case can be overwhelming, but we provide a community of practice so that you have the resources available to support your case. My name is Warner Mendenhall, and we are Freedom Counsel. Join Freedom Counsel today. Freedom Counsel